You say that once streaming hit, it changed everything?
Streaming changed everything because it allowed people to make more choices. It also allowed more production. It also broadened the idea of the structure of television because way back in the earlier 2000s and before that, everything was in a 4-act structure on television because it had to allow for advertising every 13 minutes or so. So you would divide your 60 minutes into roughly 4 acts, roughly 4 15-minute segments. They weren't really exactly 15 minutes, but something like that, so that there could be a commercial break at the end of each one. And then there was a teaser. Generally, the traditional structure, which I'll tell you, is a teaser. Well, let me start that again. The traditional structure was the show's title with even a theme song. Then sometimes there was a small commercial even right away. And then there's the teaser, anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes, which literally teases the action, or sometimes in a procedural would give you the crime or the case to be solved. Then there'd be a commercial. Then you'd go into Act 1, which would go to roughly 18, 20 minutes, 18, 20 pages. Then there'd be a commercial. Act 2 would go to roughly 30-ish pages. This is traditional. Act break. Act 3, which is the worst case, the climactic encounter, would go to roughly page 45-ish. And then Act 4 would go to the end and would be slightly shorter, would probably be 57, 58, or 55 minutes. And then there'd be another act break and another commercial. Then it got longer, and in 2006, ABC decided that they wanted to go to 6 acts in order to stick in more commercials. And so you ended up with a very long Act 1, so the people wouldn't lose you, and then they break Act 6 into Act 4 into 4 and 5, and then there would be a tag after the final act, which sometimes led into the next week, and they would get more commercials in. And this just got worse and worse and worse and worse, where there were some shows on traditional networks that had almost more commercial material than dramatic material. And people got fed up. One of the things about streaming is that there were no commercials. The minute there were no commercials, you no longer had, not only did you no longer have that structure, but you had actually more airtime. You had more flexibility of telling stories. Now, HBO always had no commercials, and the same was true of Showtime. Now you can get AMC with or without commercials, but I watched Better Call Saul the other day as it ran on television as opposed to seeing it streaming, and I was appalled that this wonderful storytelling kept being interrupted by trying to sell me something. And the same thing's true of Hulu, where you could buy it with or without commercials. You just pay more if you don't have the commercials. I can't imagine watching Handmaid's Tale, disturbed every several minutes by selling me something. And I just won't watch anything that way if I can avoid it. So that's part of the big change. It changed structurally, but it also changed the kind of material. And it changed the way people watched and the number of choices people could make.
And I'm sure that encourages binge viewing if there's no commercials, because you're so set in the story.
Well, you can also continue because you know, and they know, the purveyors of these absolutely know that, I think Amazon does this, that after you finish an episode, there's a little ticker thing that says, next episode starts in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like, no, I don't want to watch. I sat here long enough. But it's very easy to be glued for a very long time. And by the way, this disabuses the notion that young audiences have such short attention spans that they will only watch something that's 3 minutes or 10 minutes long. It was discovered, because it was tried on YouTube, what would happen if we gave people the option of watching 10-minute acts, that is 10-minute segments, or and have 12 of them to make a 120-minute movie, or to let them look at all 10, one after another, after another, after another. Everybody watched all 10. So it's just not true. It has to do with interest and attention. It doesn't have to do with something's wrong with the brain of young people who can't pay attention for more than a few minutes. If they're interested enough, they're there.
Sure, and I mean, if you have your morning coffee, I'm speaking more for myself, I'm going to be more ADD and switch around than if it's later in the day and I'm tired and now I don't have anything more on my plate. My attention's going to be there. So
yeah, well, one of the things about streaming is you can watch it at any time. I mean, if you're a morning viewer, you could see something that would normally have been an evening show at any time in the day. Years ago, when West Wing and ER were on, and they always started at 10 p.m., I knew I was going to be watching from 10 to 11 at night. I would rather not watch from 10 to 11 at night, and I would rather see those same shows at 9 or any other time. And now I can.
one last thing, you'd said the tag. Forgive me, what is the tag?
Oh, in terms of structure, after you get to your final act, in some shows, not all of them, there's a form where there's an act break or a break of some sort, and then there's more dramatic material. And that extra dramatic material is usually quite short. It might be 1 scene or 2 scenes, maybe 3 scenes, but not really much longer. And either it does something as a commentary on what that episode was about and twists it, or it just simply starts introducing what's going to be on the next episode. Every show is different. You don't find this sort of thing very much on streaming, and so we're really, when we talk about act breaks and the 4 or 5 or 6 acts, or the number of acts plus a teaser and a tag, we're really dealing with traditional legacy television.
Can you tell us about the 4-act grid?
In my book here, there is an extensive conversation about, maybe I could find a page here somewhere. Yeah, here's a picture of it, and it says using the grid. And I find, and here is the non-grid analyzing structure from a different point of view. All right, there's some other things. You can find it in the book. I found that even after the traditional 4-act structure was abandoned by networks, that as I talked to people who were writing for Netflix or HBO or any other form at all, Amazon, when I talked to seasoned writers, they were all still using it and just dropping out the act break. And the reason they were using it is that it works. It works as a storytelling mechanism, even if it does not need to be something that accommodates advertising. And that was very interesting, that given the option to not use it, plenty of people figured out, gee, I need a form anyway. And you don't just start on page 1 and go to page 60 or whatever, in a row without having any idea where the changes are, where the emphasis are, where the energy goes this way or that way. What about cliffhangers? And it was discovered by a number of seasoned writers that, you know what? I can go back to the tools that I always used without ever calling it a break or having an ad. And what it has to do with the rhythm of experience, that there is I think there may be something biological in the roughly 15-minute span. If you go to a movie in a theater, of which there aren't very many anymore, but if you were to go in a successful movie in a theater, and you observe, you might notice that roughly every 13 to 15 minutes, a little around, the audience squirms. And I've observed this several times, and I think it is actually biological. I think people are looking for a change of pace. They're looking for a cliffhanger. They're looking for something that turns the action in another direction, in what some people have called a plot point, though you don't need to use that terminology. And I think there is something to the rhythm of writing. In fact, if you look at the traditional three-act structure, the old Sid Fields three-act structure, which wasn't invented by Sid Fields, it predates him by a long time, but anyway, that structure said that Act 1 was 1/4 of the time, Act 2 is 2/4 of the time, half, and Act 3 is 1/4 of the time. And that's how the 3 acts work. They're not 3 even acts. The second act is double. But if you draw a median line down the middle of that second act, which is often where the mid-story character comes in and or there's a big change, you've got 4 acts. And so you're still back to the same thing. Now, it plays out differently in 100 minutes than it would in 60 minutes, but not that differently. And so people experiment with what Netflix will tell you and what HBO will tell you is don't talk to me about act breaks. Write what the story needs. Write it whatever length the story needs to be, and we'll deal with it. And I think that's wonderful as a very generous way of approaching writers. The writer still has to go home and structure the story. So what the story needs to be still needs turns, still needs anticipation, still needs what used to be called plot points, still needs a motor that drives to certain kinds of flips, and still needs some sort of resolution. So you find yourself back with some of the most traditional lessons in how to write as you write for even the most advanced television.
So for the outlining process, if we were to tell someone don't worry about plot structure, that could throw it off. It sounds like this is very necessary.
No, I make my students write very, very structured outlines. They can, I never say don't worry about plot structure. I ask them, what is your story and where are the turns and twists and when do they occur? And they'd better know that before they start washing around in a script that's an unknown length going in unknown directions. So no, that doesn't happen. I believe in what I was taught, which was that you get a locked outline, that you get a really good outline, and if your outline tells the story well, as driven by the characters, and has enough cliffhangers and twists and surprises and anticipation, your script will be easy to write. If you're sweating your script, it's because there was something wrong with the outline.
That'll get a lot of comments because there's of course, there's people very resistant to it. No,
Nobody
excellent.
likes to write outlines. Outlines are, with my students, I tell them when the outlines are done, you're out of outline jail because they're no fun. They don't give you a chance to show off your ability with dialogue or description. They're not beautiful. They're engineering. And creative people might want to resist. Oh, no, you're going to, make it too rigid. Actually, it's freeing. It's freeing. If you know where you're going, you can go there very well. If you're lost, you have a hard time making anything work out.